Welcome to the Relational Recovery podcast. I'm your host, Wes Thompson, joined by my co-host, Austin Hill. Today we're talking about willingness to be taught. So we hope it's helpful, and thanks for listening. Hey, Austin.
Hey, Wes. How you doing this morning?
Doing all right. Doing good. Good to be with you.
Yep. Excited for the conversation.
Yeah, same. Today I want to talk about willingness to be taught is a principle at the refuge. That's the language we use. And I want to talk about that in the context of what we do at the refuge, but also just in general. I just brought this up to you, but yesterday I was thinking about this. It started with just the thought of gratitude, and I was talking to Ben Reynolds, and we were chatting about growth and about life, and we talk about these things a lot. And what came up was just a gratitude that I realize all the people in my life that have invested in me by God's grace. And then, one thing that's been modeled for my father is just his tenacious pursuit of growth. And oftentimes what that would look like is pursuing other people, whether it's for mentorship or counseling or coaching or advice or just to get coffee and chat. And so that's always something that I've done. Like I said, largely because I think it was modeled to me, and so I saw the value in it. And so I've always pursued getting mentored, getting coached, and just thinking yesterday about how that's changed, genuinely how it's changed the trajectory, I think, of my life. I wouldn't be the man I am today without, those many people who have invested in me, some of which I've met now for years and continue to learn from. And I started to think about that, and what I was reminded of was this principle at the refuge, this willingness to be taught. I think sometimes, at least when I think about that, I think about it in terms of just the refuge. I think about it in terms of you need to be willing to listen to rules. You need to be willing to listen to the people around you. Obviously, if we're going to function well in society, we're going to function well in a team. There's an element of not just being the lone wolf, but listening to those around you. But I just want to, and that is true, but I want to end that. I think it's so much bigger than that. I think, we often say the quality of your life depends on the quality of your relationships. Well, your relationships are going to be dependent on your ability to learn from those around you and not be, some of us get so rigid and we get so, we could call it just being a know-it-all. It's like the more we live life, we think that we have all the answers, or we just get set in our ways. And that produces a rigidity and a posture that doesn't lend itself towards curiosity and towards learning and towards being open. And I think that is detrimental. And I think what we see at the refuge a lot in the recovery community is and this is probably true for most of life, is there's a lot of zealousness and excitement when somebody first, has a big experience. They first get sober, they first start to feel good. But then after several months, that starts to wane. And maybe you've experienced this in your life, or someone listening's experienced this, but all of a sudden then you just kind of settle into what's comfortable. But the reality is we don't grow when we're comfortable. There's a level of discomfort that's required for growth to take place. Because comfort means that we're just doing what is easy, and we don't grow when things are easy. So there's several themes there, but I really wanted to focus on, this idea of willingness to be taught. So Austin, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I think this is one of my favorite principles at the refuge. It's a tell, or you can almost, it foretells what someone's next couple months are going to look like with their attitude towards this. And what I mean by that is if you experience somebody, or you're in a relationship with someone and they're curious, they are interested in listening to other people, and not just like people that they want to listen to, but they're just learning about the person around them, because we can learn from everybody. Like as a parent, you learn a lot about yourself from your kids. Like you're obviously smarter than your, infant child, but you're learning from them. The moment that you think, yeah, I can't learn something from somebody, is like that first step away from willingness to be taught. I think there's like an inverse relationship between willingness to be taught and really unhealthy pride, which just turns to ignorance, where I'm like choosing to not want to learn from someone because I know better, of course. Like think about like the ignorant, or like just like the pride, and from the thought process of I am the expert at everything. Like I know better than you. I know better. Like even if it's true, like I mean, as like a parent of just girls, Wes, you know better than me just from lived experience of like how to raise boys, because you have a son. But that doesn't mean that like you're going to ignore everything that I say about parenting. We may not agree about it, but there's a attitude of um, curiosity that just leads into a better life. And it is a like willingness, like the first word in that statement, the willingness to be taught, is just, it's an attitude of prepared to do something, prepared to just listen. Because you said no, you said like the other side of this is like being a know-it-all, and we can all think of a know-it-all in our lives. They're not fun to be around. Like, and like that they probably don't enjoy life very much either. Like no matter how much they try to fake it, they don't enjoy life. Someone who thinks they're an expert in a field that they're not, they're lying to themselves, and they probably know it. So they're not enjoying life either. They're not to be envied. So what do we do about it? Like it's one of my favorites, because I can remember at a young age being on vacation and noticing there was two types of retirees that I was seeing a lot of. It was the ones who were like happy, excited, they wanted to be with their spouse in their old age because they were curious and they were wanting to like learn new things about something. And then there was the bitter old person who like, this is how it's always going to be. I know everything. You can't teach me. I'm not interested in learning something new about different cultures, different place. Like it's like the next time you're somewhere and you notice someone who's bitter, often it's connected to their interest in being taught something new. I think one of the reasons why I really respect the guys from Crosspoint. So it was Jim, and before Rich retired, those two guys talking with each other, they were constantly learning something together while they were talking. They were always taking notes. They're like, oh, I never thought about it that way. You could hear in their conversation that they were always willing to learn. And I think their life was better and more, like, not easier, but better. It's a life worth living. So, and I think I was fortunate also to have a dad that modeled, dad and mom that modeled looking for mentors or just getting different perspectives. That was just something I always saw my parents doing. And it was something the month after my dad died, I can remember sitting in my truck going, I need to find somebody who has adult kids because I don't know how to do this without someone smarter than me. It was just something like I just thought like it's the benefit of having it modeled for you, is like, this is what I need to do because I have no idea what's going on. I don't know how to do this. And you find someone that's done life well, that you respect, that's a couple of stages ahead of you, and you ask them just to get coffee. Can I just talk to you once a month for like an hour to make sure I'm not losing my mind? Like that's right there. Like that's it takes an amount of humbleness to say, I don't know what's going on. I'm not an expert in this yet.
I think that's a good jumping off point, because I think what I've been wondering here, because you and I have not the same but similar experiences, we've landed on the same belief that this is important. I was just I was thinking to myself, like, why do people not see the value in this? And I think sometimes what's modeled is this. There's a multitude of beliefs, I'm sure, but one of them that I've seen predominantly is like not knowing is weakness, and or the appearance of not having all the answers is weakness. I've definitely seen this in leaders. There was somebody that was a leader even at the refuge, for years, and I remember, and they haven't been here in a while, so I'm not going to use their name, but basically,
Nobody knows this person.
yeah. And I remember they got upset with me one day, and I couldn't figure out why. And they just straight up told me, this is a good example, I think, because it was literally this explicit. No one's ever been this explicit. But she's like, you're the leader. You're supposed to know all the answers. And they were mad at me because I didn't have all the answers. And she's like, leaders are supposed to have all the answers. And I was really caught off guard because I was like, wow, like I'd never heard that belief that explicitly. But obviously, I think a lot of us struggle with that. Um, and we ended up having a pretty good conversation about it, but it was definitely a difference in worldview because I don't believe that's true. And we don't believe that's true. And I think that's what we're saying here. But if you come into situations believing that you should have all the answers to be where you're at, then you're not going to ask for help. And you're probably not going to ask for help, and you're probably not going to seek out advice and so on and so forth because you're going to see that as being wrong or weak, something leaders don't do. Leaders have all the answers. I was managing a guy, and something else that I do for years, and that ended recently, and it didn't end very well. And I was always concerned about this individual, and I couldn't figure out why. And I realized it towards the end because of how things ended. But basically, it was one of those situations where I was consistently asking the question, how are you doing? Do you need anything? Is everything okay? Yeah, everything's great. Everything's great. Well, the results weren't great. And I kept trying to figure out, like he says he knows it all. He acts confident. What's going on? And what we realized was like he just could not ask for help. He did not have the ability to say that he didn't know something and ask for help. And ultimately, it resulted in him like not being able to do what he's doing, and which is sad. But I think that's what happens sometimes when there's this old saying I heard growing up: "Fake it till you make it." And I get what people meant by that. I do think we have to try things and figure it out as we go. But I think if we try to live our whole life that way, it's not going to end well. I rarely am an advocate anymore for faking it because I don't think faking it is good for the soul. I think the better thing to do would be to ask some people around you and really wrestle with it and learn versus faking it. So I didn't anticipate saying all that, Austin, but I don't know. What do you think about that?
I mean, on the topic of, I think when we think of someone who's not willing to be taught, it can sound kind of odd to link it to also someone who's not willing to ask for help because it's seen as weakness. I think it is, man, there is a fine line between humbleness and humiliation, like self-humiliation. I think, and we need to, because someone asking for help, it can either be something that you experience as I'm being humble or I'm humiliated for asking for help. Because if you have experience where you ask for help and you're just constantly berated for like, how do you not know how to do this? There have been people in my life where I can remember being led by them and said, like, I need you to go do this, and having absolutely no direction given. And I'm just like, well, I have no idea how to do this. And I said, I need help doing this. I don't know how to do it. And they're like, well, why don't you know how to do it? Just go do it. Just do it. Like, okay. And then you do it the best you can with the information you have. And then you get berated for doing it not the way that they wanted you to do it. And it's just like, this is how you learn. I berate you. So like, that doesn't seem like a blast. Like, so why in the world, why would I ask for help when the people around me who should show me how to do things um, don't give you the guidance. Um, so it's there's that side of it, and then the other side of it's like, I'm not going to ask for help because I don't need anybody's help. That's just as dangerous. And that's like the know-it-all person that we were talking about earlier. So there's both sides of this willingness to be taught, because um, just because like we all had bad leaders in our lives. And just because you had a bad leader in your life doesn't mean every person in management, every person who has authority over you is a bad person too. None of them are perfect. None of us are perfect at all. Because like being willing to be taught is admitting I'm not perfect. It admits that I can improve. It admits that I'm not going to do things right all the time. So it is a very reciprocal attitude, because if I'm willing to be taught, that means I also have to acknowledge that the people around me have things to learn also. Because it's not just like I'm the only one who can be taught. Everyone else knows everything, and everybody else is right and I'm always wrong. That's not what this is. It's, can I take in information? Can I run it through what my values are and what I think is important to me and what is important to me? And then how do I respond for that? So it's this seeking other perspectives is something where we have to be first. Like, it can be crippling if you're just constantly looking for someone else's approval or perspective to then decide what you should do. It should be like, I have an idea as to what my decision should be. I'm going to get feedback from other people, and I'm going to use that information to look at what I'm thinking, and then I'm going to make a decision based on what I believe. But I'm still getting information from other people. I'm still learning from other people. So it can be, it's not about being subservient. It's not about just like doing whatever everyone says. It's about being willing to take in information that's different than what you know. And that can be scary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. That's really good. I think the way that maybe we could delve into before we, as we bring this to a close, just how we cultivate this, if maybe this is something we struggle with, because this starts with curiosity. I think it starts with the desire to grow, right? Like, people that don't want to grow, people that aren't curious, probably aren't going to ask questions and seek other people out. And I also think that, we've got to work on pride and arrogance and ego, because I think that's sometimes one of the barriers, like you said, that keeps people from learning from others, because we all, we all want to be right. And I think that desire to be right can get in the way of actual growth, because you said it earlier, but like, nobody likes a know-it-all. And the reason we don't like a know-it-all is because that's why like arguments never, like, rarely change people's minds, because people typically aren't like listening to learn. They're listening to wait for their turn to speak so that they can show everybody how right they are. And um, people don't feel cared for and don't change because someone else is right. They typically, we're moved by people on a much more emotional level, where we feel heard and loved and safe and that we belong. We don't change and are moved by people because we think they're so smart. So,
Well, I mean, I think being in a relationship with someone who's a know-it-all, that know-it-all is constantly saying, I don't need you. You need me. Ugh.
right, right.
Ugh. Gosh, that's terrible.
Which does work sometimes. Like, people do follow people like that, but that's not a transformative relationship. Like, I think of like some political leaders. I think of some movements. But that's not a healthy relationship. A healthy relationship is one that's reciprocal, which means we're both learning from each other. That there's not somebody who is dominating all of the time, and devaluing the other person. So yeah, I think that's a good point. So I think we have to start with checking our ego. I think we have to, and that's all of us, because we all have ego. We all have pride. So we have to question that. We have to cultivate a desire to grow. We have to cultivate curiosity. And curiosity always typically starts with, it takes the form of questions. So asking questions, one thing that we could ask ourselves maybe is, when I think about the conversations I've had lately, how often have I made declarative statements versus asking questions?
Say more to
Because
that.
if all I'm doing
What's a
is,
declarative statement?
uh, I was almost chuckling, because kind of what I'm doing right now, where it's like you're saying, this is what I believe. Do this. Don't do this. You're making truth claims. You're making a statement. A statement is like, um, you should be more curious. Curiosity is good. That's a statement. A question would be, um, do you believe curiosity would make you a healthier individual? So one is a statement, one is a question, and I think curiosity typically takes the form of questions, not statements. So if we want to grow in curiosity, we need to find ourselves asking more questions, and so that's the point I was trying to make. So any last thoughts from you?
I think it's we tend to find in conversation, like when we're talking about like what's good to, like, we both agree like a declarative statement is having an attitude or willingness to be taught is something that's good. We think that it's important. I mean, leaders are learners, like people who want to learn, improve, people, it's a good thing. But when we have these things, I think we go in our mind, we're like, well, someone who is not willing to be taught is just egotistical, um, and a know-it-all. I think there's two sides to both of these. Like, not asking for help is a different version of not willing to be taught. Not being like, having pride doesn't always look like I know best. Sometimes pride looks like I'm never going to say anything, which sounds counterintuitive, but it's pride. It's just like, I don't want to negatively impact somebody, so I'm not gonna bother them. I'm not gonna point out when they're doing something unhealthy. I'm not going to share my expertise. That's pride, also. So it looks different. So we need to be careful, because one type of pride is really easy to see. The other one isn't. Now, that doesn't mean that we need to just constantly go and say, well, everyone's prideful, everyone sucks, what's the point? It's everyone can learn, everyone can improve. And this conversation isn't us. This is supposed to be another tool for us to use, not a weapon to cut people down.
Yeah, that's really good. That's really good. Well, good chatting with you, man. I think we could all grow in this willingness to be taught. So God bless you. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Relational Recovery Podcast. We'll be back soon with a new conversation. We'll see you then.